good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. We are back in FPL mode. I'm your host, Zophar. In this video, my co host, Lateriser, and I will be discussing our initial drafts ahead of our big game week 17 pod on the 20th. How's it going, buddy? Long time. I think it's the least we have spoken. That's like 2 months.
Yes, I know. And it's so good to see your face. I mean, we just logged in 10 minutes ago and it was just so nice to see you. Feels like FPL is well and truly back because podding with Zoph is just a sign that FPL is around the corner. How you been? Enjoyed the World Cup?
It's been fantastic, right? What a tournament it has been. It sort of refreshed my love for football. You start remembering why you actually watch football, not just for FPL, but just how like anything can happen on the day. What about you?
Yeah, man, it's been great. Absolutely great. Been busy with a few weddings, but I've made sure I've not missed the matches. Like the phone's on. I'm barely paying attention to what's happening. Anything else. The games have been great. I mean, especially that Argentina-Netherlands game. So good to see that in the knockout stages. I actually don't even mind the fire and the passion that these guys do, because these players, when they're going through the rigors of professional football, the ultimate dream for all of them is World Cup glory. Like, say what you want to say about club football, but from a player's point of view, World Cup is it.
Is it?
Right. But I think we need to switch back into FPL mode. And I saw an article on the Scout this morning, and I'm like, Zoss probably had a tinker. I wrote my article for the Scout this morning as well. I had a tinker as well. So I thought it'd be a good idea for us to just discuss where we are with our initial thoughts. So let's dive right into it.
Yep. Speaking of fire and passion, we asked Bakar to send in his drafts, but he's too busy filming for the next season of Love Island. So he should be with us on Tuesday.
Let's get into our sponsor plus before we move into the drafts.
Sure, let's do that. All data you see on the FPL Wire is taken from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. The new improved members area is now up and running, and the new comparison tool lets you compare key stats for up to 3 players. Player projections are also live, and as always, you can access the custom stats table we create or make one for yourself. Sign up for membership today using our affiliate link in the description below. Right, LR, your very template draft first up.
Yes, I mean, what can you do? The doubles are sort of dictating the players and the pieces on the screen that you see there, but I'll quickly take you through my draft, and it's not very far away from your draft. So just reading out the players before we get into the nitty-gritties and start discussing the positions and what we are debating and who we're debating with. My keepers are Ward and Kepa. In defense, I have White, Reece James, Cancelo, Trippier, and Bueno. In midfield, I have Salah, Rashford, Foden, Almiron, and Andreas Pereira. And up front, I have Darwin, Haaland, and Mitro, which I think everybody has. That's front three is, I think, common to everybody and every draft that I've seen on Twitter. Where are your changes, Zoph? What about your draft?
I only have 3 different players from the draft you showed, and I think Patterson Bueno is pretty much the same. It's just a placeholder. I haven't figured out who the 5th value defender is going to be. But the main 2 differences are I've got Martinelli and Mount, and where you've got, I think, Rashford and Foden.
And Foden. Yes.
Otherwise, it's all pretty much the same. So let's go back. Let's talk position by position where our dilemmas are. I'll just go back to keep your draft on here. How set are you on the Ward Kepa combo?
Not very set. There might, full disclosure, I'm 0.1 million of this draft, and Bruno actually was somebody who was 3.8, who was a United defender, Brandon Williams. So I do need to find money, but these are early drafts, and these are kind of the players in the pool of players that I want to work with. Let's see what happens. But one keeper I'm actually considering is Edison, because I actually need to remove some money from my draft. I do want a piece of the City clean sheet with a potential double-double coming for them in the next 5 or 6 game weeks. And Cancelo hasn't been that attacking. So how I'm thinking about this entire situation is Cancelo 7.2. We do have some 5.5, 6 million defenders who are very attacking. So I might want to switch that up, save some money, and get a piece of the City clean sheet. I might not get the attacking returns that Cancelo gets, but that's just one of the positions I'm contemplating. I might not end up doing it, but the only other keeper that I'm looking at is Edison, or then saving money and going for somebody cheaper. Where are you at with the keepers?
I think Ward is as close to a no-brainer as it gets. No point discussing. But for me, it's either Kepa or Iverson. There's literally nobody else, I think, in the consideration, because for me, Edison is a waste of a City slot. And B, the problem is, right, Cancelo is going to be very highly owned again because there's a double that's
Yeah.
coming. And like he can get that 15 pointer on any game. Is very much possible. And when that happens, your rank plummets. I just don't see that
Yeah.
myself it being worth the trade off. And I want that spot sort of like, the price points, because I'm all about those price points. I want that possible TAA switch, possible Robertson switch. I want that
Yeah.
premium defender spot in there. So I think that's pretty set in stone for me. Let's talk about Reece James.
Just while we're on that, I mean, it's the point that you make about structure is great. Danny on the first pod that we did made that point where you have to keep the price point accessible. In my head, I'm sort of ensuring the rank protection against Cancelo's 15 pointer by at least covering 6 points
Nah,
with the
man.
clean sheet. That's what I'm thinking about.
I don't
The
think I
only
don't
reason
think
I
you cover
might
it.
need to do it is if I need more money.
I don't think Edison covers Cancelo at all.
All right, fair enough.
So
Reece James.
Yep. He was back in training yesterday, and it's interesting. While writing my article, I had a close look at Chelsea's schedule, right? It's not that bad. So when we show up, we have effectively 3 games in 7 days, which is the equivalent of a European week. It's not where you have games at 48 hours and all that stuff. So, and he's had the week off. I think there's a possibility he might start 2 of 3. And what's interesting about the double is we play Man City, then 2 days later we play them in the FA Cup, and then there's a 4-day break till the Fulham game. So it's very likely that he could start the City game at home, sit out the FA Cup game, and then play the Fulham game. And the thing with James is our team is built around him.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this on the earlier pod that we did. And the thing with me is, and I've seen this previously, you guys don't function if your wingbacks aren't fit. Chelsea, given the personnel that they have right now, is very dependent because they're your best players on the wingbacks being fit. And 2 other factors. It's just not the doubles, right? You have the Bournemouth and the Forest game
top
first up, which are
the
potential 15 pointers, right? If you're talking about Reece James. And he's 5.8. He's not as expensive as the premium price we might be paying for a Robertson or a Trent or a Cancelo. He's still 5.8, which I think for the potential that he offers, like I don't see James leaving my team. And I think by the time Boxing Day comes around, most people will have James in their draft.
Bournemouth, Forest, and Fulham, 3 promoted teams back to back. When do you get a fixture schedule like that?
Yeah. And it is worth mentioning that, yes, Chelsea's underlying stats have been absolutely rubbish. They haven't found their feet. But I think Potter was just experimenting to find his lineup without the wingbacks, because I remember he was changing formations frequently. So we quite don't yet know. What I do want to ask you is if somebody's interested in a double up in that Chelsea defense, is there anybody you like?
Thiago Silva probably won't play all those games. Chilwell, same thing. We have fitness issues. Now we have a lot of options for Fana, maybe Koulibaly. But there's such limited upside. And I mean, you can go when you have Kepa as the option in there. Kepa is also back in training now. I just don't see the need for it. Because Kepa, let's say, even if he doesn't play the double, right? Let's assume that Mendy starts out. Kepa, even from week 21, 22, etc. on, you're getting access to a top 4 defense at 4.5. So even if Kepa doesn't start the season, I think he's worth having in your squad still.
Yeah. Again, 4.5, top 6 defense. If they're able to perform as per their potential as we know it. That's the main thing. Any update on Kante's fitness also? Because I think it's an important cog in this understanding.
He's out for a while.
He's out for a while. No, that's the problem. And Ben Chilwell, where are we with him?
I think I haven't seen pictures of him in full training doing more rehab work, but I haven't really fully clued into that. But the problem is he's so fragile. Yeah. I wouldn't, having James and Chilwell is walking a bit of a tightrope.
Fair enough. Trippier, I think, is a bit of a no-brainer for both of us.
Yeah, no point discussing Trippier there.
And now you nailed, is Ben White a certainty in your team?
Now, what's interesting is before I had James in there, earlier I had Dalot there, and instead of White, I had Gabriel. Because I don't really like rotating my 3 defenders. I like playing 3 guys with attacking upside every week. White doesn't have that as much. I know he's been getting forward a little bit more, but Gabriel has a lot more attacking upside. So if I wouldn't have James in there and I would have a sort of a perma play 3rd defender, I'd probably spend the extra on White. But right now, as it stands, he's my 4th defender. But I don't really think it's necessary to spend that extra money.
Fair enough. He's somebody who's not a certainty in my team. as things stand, because I might need to remove some money from this draft because I might need a 4 million defender instead of Bruno. White is the position I'm looking at. And when it comes to Arsenal, I firstly think that Gabriel Jesus will have a big impact on that team, because it's just not the uh, goals and the skill set that he offers in offense. He's the first line of defense for that Arsenal team. He's the guy who triggers the press in that Arsenal team. He sort of dictates how they press, and I think that he'll be a big miss. They will be better than what they were last season without Jesus, because I think that team has evolved substantially. But I'm not confident, and I think it will have a bigger impact than most might perceive. And their fixtures, right? I mean, first up, they've got West Ham, which is at home, which is an all right fixture. Then they have Brighton away, Newcastle at home, Spurs away, and United at home. I don't see many clean sheets here. I mean, if you're looking at just the fixtures, you don't see many clean sheets. It's more that philosophical debate that we have where you just back a good team with a good defense. That's the reason why White's in there. So if I'm looking to remove some money, and I know that Arsenal have a double in 23, but I think I'm happy to play the waiting game and get the right players by the time 23 comes around.
Yeah, because we don't necessarily have form to go back on. We have pedigree. Yeah. So we can pretty much bank on pedigree while we ascertain form as it evolves once the restart really gets into groove.
Yep. And that's why I think we're done with the defense conversation.
Yeah,
You're saying something,
so I was just saying about Arsenal, and I noticed this in my article. It was a bit strange. They're actually playing Arsenal and City are top 2 for XGC. Then they're playing the next 5 teams in a row. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. They play all of them. So even in terms of attack, right, we talked about Martinelli. And I think like you've gone against him, and I'm very tempted to do that because I think at 70-80% ownership. Now, the thing with Jesus, right, he was probably benefiting Martinelli the most. He would naturally drift to the left, allowing Martinelli to come inside. So I think that's going to be a big loss. But there's a possibility now Martinelli could play up front, could get some minutes there instead of Nketiah. So it's a double-edged sword, but I think I'm going to start with Martinelli purely because it's just backing Arsenal as league leaders and then potentially switch to Rashford. But then the problem is Rashford's best 3 fixtures are the first 3 ones.
Exactly.
So you're sort of missing the boat.
I'm very comfortable starting with Rashford. There are 2 or 3 reasons. First up, we have Forest, Wolves, and Bournemouth. I mean, if you couldn't write a better trio of fixtures if you tried. And the thing with Rashford, it's an interesting situation also because his contract ends in this summer and we have a year's extra option. And all the noises that have been coming out of the United camp is they're trying to woo him and they're laying out the red carpet for him. He's absolutely nailed. He's had a good World Cup. He's got a very, very high ceiling as a pick. And with these 3 fixtures, what I foresee happening is Garnacho is a factor. But what I see happening is Martial, maybe his minutes are managed because, again, we don't know how he's going to react to so many games in quick succession. What I see happening is Martial playing maybe 60-65 minutes in the first 3 games when the fixture schedule is cramped up. Garnacho coming on for the last 25 minutes as an impact sub. He takes up the left position where Rashford is playing, and then Rashford plays the last 20 minutes up front. And Ten Hag said something in his interview which is very interesting, where he says like Rashford is one of the best players in the world to have on the last line of defense. So Ten Hag just considers him as a forward, whether he's playing on the left or whether he's playing centrally. I think he's going to be very heavily involved in the goals we have. And he's one pick I'm very comfortable sitting with. And I'm very happy to make that bet against Martinelli, especially because of fixtures we mentioned. And the number 2 reason is I'm still Odegaard curious. Like he's got the same goal threat underlying numbers as Martinelli and Saka, and he's got better assist potential. There is one factor. And again, when you take out a pawn like Jesus from the Arsenal team, we don't know what's going on in Arteta's mind in terms of how he's going to make that team function. It might be a little different. He's got time to think about it. He's got time to prep and see how he's going to make his team set up without Gabriel Jesus as well. So we don't know what we don't know when it comes to Arsenal. And things might change in terms of who might turn out to be the most attacking asset in that Arsenal team. So I'm happy to play the waiting game.
That's a fair point. And even the fixture after Bournemouth about Man City and Arsenal, those are Rashford games.
Exactly.
Playing on the counter. So you might have convinced me on that aspect. That's where really I'm dilly-dallying on that position. Let's talk about Foden.
He's the pick I'm not sure about. Like if I can help it, I want Kevin De Bruyne. And the problem with Phil Foden is only one. I have no problems with him as a pick when he's on the field. The thing is his predictability of when he's on the field is a little bit dicey. And that's why we want Kevin De Bruyne on a team, because you're getting more nailed on minutes. Now, the other factor in my head is when I'm comparing him to other 8 million mids. Foden in terms of ceiling is my favorite. But when the potential double doubles are coming, what's going on in my head is at least he's getting maybe 80 to 120, 125 minutes guaranteed in a double. Because if he's he's looking like he's going to start one of the two games. And if he doesn't start the other game, he's looking like he's going to come on the last 20, 25 minutes of that game too. So I'm happy with 100 minutes of Phil Foden to do the damage in a double game week. And when I'm watching Manchester City play, outside of Haaland, I think he's the likeliest to score a goal in that team because his job is to be around Haaland for the second ball when the crosses are coming in from either side. His job is to be around the 6-yard box. He's inside the box, which is why I like him as an asset. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but I think the other picks that I have in my team are fairly nailed. You don't need to worry about minutes. So I'm just rolling the dice there.
Yep, I think I agree with the points you make about Foden, but what I have heard is joining training a little bit later than everybody else. I think that Carabao Cup game is on the Thursday. He's only joining up with training on Tuesday, Wednesday. With the league kicking off on Monday and 3 games, like all that stuff, I'm very wary of Foden starting all those 3.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Kevin a little bit now. While doing my stats dive yesterday, I noticed that Kevin is 5th for expected goal involvement, but he's not even in the top 25 for non-penalty XG. So he's purely an assist machine now.
Correct.
Does he warrant that 12.5 million, versus a Salah who we saw over the last 4 game weeks? And as you had mentioned in your article, his goal threat had gone up through the roof.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are many reasons to not have Salah in your team at the moment. And I just want to sort of ignore them because Kane has maybe 1 extra game. De Bruyne has potentially 2 extra games. And it's worth paying the price for 150 minutes of a premium asset when you're looking at that just as a separate equation. That's why I'm hoping that Foden sort of covers up for De Bruyne. That's the dice that I'm willing to roll. But, if you're looking for a premium, I have no argument against De Bruyne. You said he's become an assist machine, but he's one of the best assisters in the league. He's assisting the best finisher in the league as well. So you don't really mind that because the points will trickle through. And then he has the Wolves game potential where he gets 2 or 3 returns in one game too. And, a lot of his ownership is going to be very, very high. And if you're at the negative end of a beating of something like that, then your rank is going to plummet because his ownership is going to be high.
It's actually going to be higher than Salah's, I think. And the fixtures also make things quite interesting. I think Villa are going to be a much tougher nut to crack under Emery. They've had 6 weeks with the new manager. They've had, I think, one of the least players. I think there are only 3 or 4 players who even went to the World Cup. So they'll be much better drilled. Now, Liverpool's fixtures are strange because they have only 2 home games in the next 6. And those are against Leicester and Chelsea. They have Villa away, Brentford away, Brighton away, Wolves away, who could all 4 be tough games. Even Wolves now with the new manager. So the fixture play for Kevin, it's Leeds and Everton, which are good fixtures, and Chelsea and Man United, 2 easy fixtures. Then Spurs, Wolves, and Spurs again. So fixture-wise, it's always Kev, right? But what I've sort of penciled in right now is start with Salah, then switch to Kev, because I like those 2 Villa-Leicester games. Also, you get a chance to see how Salah plays, how Liverpool starts, City starts. Sort of like maybe not put all your eggs in the City basket because Haaland is going to be your captain anyway. But I could come around. That's another spot. The Salah versus KDB one is open for debate.
Yeah, same here. And actually might borrow, you have Mason Mount in your team. I might borrow that idea. Maybe start with him instead of Foden because then you're getting the double and then you have both options open. You can switch Mount to Foden if he looks better. You can switch Salah to KDB if he looks better. So I do not mind that. And it can be Mount, it can be Kulusevski based on who you prefer in that 8 million price point as well. I like both assets. I just don't know where Chelsea are in their attack at all. It's like you say, a tukka, right? A shot in the dark. And putting yourself in a position to get lucky. So yeah, those spots are off debate to me. But if I can help it, I want to make sure I don't start without Salah because my strong instinct, inkling, everything inside me is just telling me to not compromise on Mo Salah. I feel that strongly about him right now.
I completely agree. And now the reason why I'm a bit bullish on Mount is I don't think Kovacic will probably play the next few games. He's going to be there in the World Cup, I think, for that 4th place playoff. And Mount is very vital when Kovacic doesn't play because we have no ball progressors otherwise. And I think he's very capable of playing these 3 games in a week. He barely had minutes towards the tail end. You had Henderson starting instead. So if you had to ask me if any Chelsea attacker is going to start, the first 3, maybe Sterling, maybe Oba now with Broja being having issues, but the price points are much higher for those guys.
Pulisic had a strong World Cup, and he was playing some minutes towards the end before we stopped for
Correct.
the
But I
World
think
Cup.
he's more of a risk to your front guys. I don't think he can play the Mason Mount role.
Correct, correct. When you're talking about Kovacic and him not playing the first few games, that actually puts me off Mason Mount a little.
It makes us
Because
worse.
again, it makes you all considerably worse in my opinion. Because I think the replacements that you all have in midfield aren't as good or far from being as good. So that's the dilemma.
But is
And
Bournemouth
again,
Forest Fulham?
yeah, that's also there. But if you're
Flat
comparing
track
him to
bully.
a Phil
Mason Mount
Foden,
is a flat
and
track bully. Sorry to keep
he is
interrupting
a
you. I
flat
just
track.
wanted to make sure we get that across. Sorry, go ahead on Foden.
No, it's good. It's a conversation. I absolutely don't mind us interrupting each other. But that's the conversation again, because Phil Foden also has good fixtures. And I think closer to Boxing Day, we'll hear noises from the camps in terms of who's been training, how much, what the managers are saying, etc. And I think that's when we'll make these decisions. Anybody else in midfield that you're considering? Kulusevski is still in my thoughts. I haven't ruled him out because I do like Spurs' fixtures at the start. He's been an underrated asset in terms of how he's performed in general for Spurs. And the perception that I have when it comes to Spurs is when Kulusevski is fit, Spurs are singing. They're just a much better team. He adds that balance to the team when they're playing. So yeah, he's in my thoughts too. James Madison is also in my thoughts.
Yeah, Madison, but the problem is the opening two fixtures about Newcastle and Liverpool. You always want to start strong, right? Because this almost feels like another season. I know you buy players for the long term, but you want to get off to a flyer, and those two fixtures aren't ideal. And I want to go back to Spurs fixtures. I don't think they are that easy either, because Brentford away. I always look at Brentford at their own stadium as not that easy a fixture as when they're on their travels. They're quite good at home. Then you have Villa. Then you have Palace and Spurs. I think Son has been at the World Cup. Kane has had a difficult World Cup. You have Romero who's still there. They've been Perisic who's still there. I think they might start a little bit slow. So I'm not as bullish on Kulusevski. I'd rather wait and watch. That's where I am.
Fair enough. Fair enough. One player that we haven't spoken about in this price potential as a placeholder is Anthony. I think he's nailed down on the right wing for United. Again, a placeholder to have an explosive start to move into the right asset. And again, you have NFO Wolves Bournemouth for United as well. Just while we're talking and brainstorming, just a placeholder. That's all. In fact, then you have the option because Anthony loves to take a shot on goal. So what do? You can decide whether you take Rashford. Anthony, just a thought in my head. I thought I put down. Anderson, Andreas Pereira, and Almiron. I think both of us are pretty set on those picks.
Pereira, let's not waste any time discussing, and what is interesting with Pereira and Almiron, right? And I notice his rotation wise, and I think in 19 Almiron is Arsenal away. Prior to that, he has Leicester and Leeds. So the fixtures before are good, and you can easily bench him in 19 for Pereira, because you want Pereira for a double game week fixture. He has a haul potential there. So that works. And Newcastle's fixtures are great. And I don't think Almiron is a minutes risk anymore. He is simply nailed on and one of the first names on the team sheet.
Yeah. And I was writing this morning, and even if he underperforms massively on his expected data, he's still 5.8. Like at 5.8, you're okay with 1 and 2, 1 and 3 returns anyway. And he's a part of that front three. I just see no reason to not have him in my team. He's one of those glue guys which facilitates and enables everything else around in your team.
Correct. Let's talk about Mitrovic a little bit. The 4 yellow cards is a very interesting dilemma. Now, two things can happen. Let's say now we know that he doesn't get booked 17, 18. You still can't captain him in 19 because he could get booked in the first game and miss the second. If you're pretty much hoping for him to get a yellow card in 17 or 18 and miss the game and be there for 19. So is Mitrovic a lock?
In my team, as things stand, it's a lock. If Fulham didn't have that double, I'd have Martial ahead of him. Like, I have no doubts in my head. If Fulham didn't have that double, Anthony Martial would be in my team. But they do have that double, and you can't ignore that. And Mitrovic, a very interesting stat that I read when Neil wrote an article for Fulham, he's got 4 goals against the big 6 teams. So again, fixtures don't really matter for Fulham, who are a front foot team, always playing on the attack. And amongst all players in the league, he's got the most number of shots against the big 6 teams as well. So even better than the likes of other players from the big 6 teams. Mitrovic has the highest number of shots against the big 6 teams. So Danny put this really well. In a team that is attack minded, funneling all their chances towards a Mitrovic, it's very easy to underappreciate a pick like that. So yeah, he's in, and then we'll see what happens when it comes to captaincy. You know, a Chelsea option might emerge by the time the first 2-3 game weeks are done. So I think that conversation we can have at that point.
Yeah, but the fixtures, the problem with Chelsea is essentially Fulham and Man City. I look at it as possibly Fulham plus 2 points, whereas Mitro has Leicester and Chelsea. So I think the
Yeah,
ceiling is higher with Mitro, but it's obviously the yellow card risk that's going to be hanging. So let's not discuss Haaland. Let's spend some. I think even Darwin with the Diaz injury, I immediately went and transferred him in.
yeah, he's. I mean, I thought about it and played around with Marshall instead of Darwin for a minute, but Darwin, when Diaz and Jota are injured, need to be in your team. And I'm pretty confident Klopp goes with the 4-3-3 with Firmino as the sort of 10 and Darwin and Salah as the split forwards. And he's just a great asset playing in that position. So I'm not too worried. Yeah, he's fairly locked in my team as well.
Yeah, he's more locked in, I would say, than Salah.
Yeah, I agree. Because of the potential replacements in those positions. The reason maybe you would think about Darwin is if you want to maybe shoehorn a Kane in your team.
That's
Because he
another thing,
does have a
because
double.
I've got 1.5 in the bank in my draft. Now, to move Darwin to Kane, I only need to free up another 1 million, which is quite easy by doing, let's say, a Mount to a Rashford down the line, etc. So I'm keeping that option open as well, potentially for Spurs, because Kane burnt me hard in the first half of the season.
Yeah.
One thing I remember while signing off, I made a note that I must get Kane in when the season restarts. And he's not
And
there
what you
right
saw in
now.
the first 16 game weeks was Kane's flaw because Spurs weren't actually good. And, it's something we spoke about in the previous pod. He scored 12 goals. 6 out of those 12 goals were from set pieces. But you can't ignore that Spurs are good at set pieces and he's got that in his harmony now. And if they have a good game, he's got a few more open goals as potential as well. But yeah, it'd be very difficult though to justify him over any of the 3 picks that we've spoken about. So that's where we are.
Especially, we have to keep mentioning that Haaland is going to be perma-cap.
Exactly. I do want to see if I can shoehorn a Spurs player or two in my team, and it's difficult to find a way to do that at the moment. Let's see where we are. Closer to date. I think that's it for this episode.
Let's do a Discord plug before we wrap up.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we are going to get a lot more active on the Discord now. I think Zoph's been active in there. I've been busy this week, but we're generally active talking to people. And I think now is the best time to join the Discord because you want to get your drafts in place before Boxing Day emerges. So if there was a time to join our Discord, now is the time. And it's not just us, right? I mean, there are such good people on our Discord, and we got some really great Arsenal fans, Chelsea fans, Liverpool fans, United fans giving their input. I think it always helps. It always helps to have a safe community, a safe space to have a discussion. And when will you see us next? You will see us on Tuesday, where we have Bucker joining us as well. We'll have our standard FPL Wire pod. Expected to be a fairly long one, and I don't know if we're going to do one more after that. We'll see about that. If you did enjoy this draft video, do let us know in the comments below if you like such videos and if you want us to push through some more draft videos as well. We'll be happy to do that. Until next time, any last words, Zoph?
Nothing much. See you guys on Tuesday. Hopefully, Bucker will have some clothes on. See you then.